My name is Emmy Collins, and that night, I felt the weight of my entire family crash down on me in a single horrifying moment. I remember the moment vividly. We had gathered at my parents' home for the Sunday family dinner, the kind that always felt like walking into someone else's play. The aroma of roasted chicken, buttery mashed potatoes, and baked ziti hung heavy in the air, but my stomach churned. I had sensed tension in the room all day, the kind that builds quietly and suddenly explodes. I didn't know the extent yet, but I would soon. Daniel had finished his main course and leaned back in his chair, a smug grin splitting his face. He pointed at my car keys I had absent-mindedly set beside my plate. "Your BMW is now mine," he said, laughing. It wasn't a joke. His words cut through the chatter like a knife. Everyone at the table paused. My parents exchanged looks as if rehearsed for this exact moment. "Yes," my mother added, voice light and oddly casual. "Your brother deserves it more than you do. You can join the bus, Emmy." She smiled, the kind of smile that disguised cruelty beneath a veneer of civility. I froze, unable to speak. My fork trembled in my hand, the room spinning around me as laughter and polite murmurs surrounded me like distant waves. I left without saying a word, slipping out of the dining room before the absurdity of the scene could press further. For months leading up to that night, I had ignored the subtle signs that my family's love for me had always come with conditions. Daniel, with his charm and wit, seemed to glide through life while I labored quietly behind the scenes. I had always been the stable one, responsible, hard-working, patient. I paid my bills on time, balanced my accounts, and never asked for anything I couldn't earn. Meanwhile, Daniel stumbled, fumbled, and failed. And yet, somehow, he was always rewarded. My parents had never hidden their favoritism. I remember the countless times I had baked an extra batch of cookies for Daniel's school projects, or lent him money quietly to fix a car he barely used. They called me generous, patient, understanding. In truth, they were grooming me to be the invisible one, the obedient one, the one whose achievements were quietly expected but never celebrated. The BMW wasn't just a car. It was a symbol of everything I had worked for independently, a tangible piece of freedom. And yet, here it was, declared his, along with my parents' casual endorsement. I drove home in silence, the cold autumn air brushing against my face as I clenched the steering wheel until my knuckles were white. The betrayal was suffocating, but beneath it, a small ember of clarity began to grow. If they believed they could take what I earned without consequence, they were about to learn the price of arrogance. I spent that night pacing my apartment, replaying the dinner over and over in my mind. Every smirk, every sarcastic comment, every glance from my parents became fuel. I realized I had been given the perfect opportunity, not just to claim what was rightfully mine, but to expose how easily they assumed they could rewrite reality to their liking. And if they thought the BMW was the ultimate prize, they were wrong. There was much more at stake, something far more valuable: control, inheritance, and the truth. 3 days later, I arrived at my parents' house, carrying 3 yellow envelopes, thick with the weight of the legal papers inside. I had spent weeks preparing these documents. They weren't hastily thrown together. Each one had been carefully drafted with the help of my attorney. The first contained the updated will of our late grandfather, who had passed years earlier but whose original bequest had been manipulated by my parents to favor Daniel. The second included official property deeds, transferring ownership of the Beaverton family estate back into my name. The third contained formal notifications and directives, detailing precisely how they were to vacate the property and rectify the misappropriated BMW. Everything was legal, binding, and irreversible. I stepped into the backyard where they were gathered, laughter spilling across the yard as my relatives mingled. Crystal-clear skies illuminated Daniel's smug face and my mother's proud smile. They had no idea the storm I carried in those envelopes. "Emmy," my mother called brightly, looping her arm through mine. "Come join us." There's plenty of food. Her tone was rehearsed, syrupy sweet, as if she expected me to play the role of the doting daughter who forgave everything. I smiled faintly, a mask of politeness. I nodded, then reached into my bag and pulled out the first envelope. The room fell into a subtle stillness, though no one yet understood why. I placed it on the table and waited, letting the anticipation settle. I didn't speak at first. Let them feel the quiet, the weight of what was about to unfold. Daniel leaned over, curious. "What's that?" he asked, fingers twitching toward the envelope. I shook my head. "Open it," I said softly, each word deliberate. My voice was calm, neutral, deceptively gentle. The air grew heavier. My mother's eyes narrowed slightly, the first flicker of unease crossing her face. "Emmy, this isn't." I cut her off. "Just open it, please." Daniel tore open the first envelope, revealing the updated will. His smirk faltered almost immediately. My grandfather's estate, which they had always assumed was theirs to manipulate, had been legally restored to reflect my rightful inheritance. Property, bank accounts, and sentimental heirlooms, all back under my control. The laughter in the yard died slowly, like air escaping a balloon. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, the first sign of panic breaking through her composed facade. "Emmy, how?" she stammered. I motioned to the second envelope. "Check the deeds. The house in Beaverton, the one you've been claiming as yours? It's legally mine. All occupants are required to vacate within 30 days. I allowed a pause, letting the words settle. The hum of summer cicadas filled the silence as their faces drained of color. Daniel's jaw tightened. He glanced at my mother, then back at me, struggling to find words. This isn't possible," he muttered. "It is," I said simply, keeping my tone even. "You assumed my silence meant weakness. You assumed I'd let entitlement overwrite the truth. I didn't. And now, the law confirms it." Finally, I handed over the third envelope. Inside were the documents outlining the BMW situation. Every paper traced back to the fraud they had committed, claiming the vehicle as Daniel's, ignoring that I had legally purchased it with my own funds. I had arranged for the bank and DMV to recognize the rightful ownership. There was no argument, no room for negotiation. The keys had been reassigned to my name, along with formal notice that any attempt to use or claim the car without my consent would result in immediate legal action. Daniel's face turned crimson. My mother shook, silent for the first time, caught between disbelief and fury. I felt a strange satisfaction, not vengeance born from malice, but justice reclaimed. Every small betrayal, every subtle undermining, every silent manipulation had finally been returned to the light. The relatives who had been present looked on with wide eyes. Some murmured condolences. Others whispered astonishment. I remained poised, calm, collecting myself as if I were simply conducting an ordinary family matter. But inside, I felt a steady rush of triumph, the culmination of years of quiet endurance and unseen work. "You blindsided us," my mother whispered finally, her voice shaking. How could you?" I smiled faintly. "You blindsided me first, 16 months ago, when you erased my efforts, my name, my achievements, and my future. I'm just returning everything to its rightful place." Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it again, realizing that words were useless against the facts. Legal papers don't lie. Official deeds don't bend to entitlement. My patience, my calm, my strategic silence had been more powerful than any shouting match. I didn't linger after that. I stepped back into the quiet evening, letting them absorb the weight of the consequences. The yard, once a playground of pride and privilege for them, now felt foreign. The laughter, the confidence, the casual sense of ownership, they had lost it all, legally, irrevocably, and deservedly. I didn't need to gloat. Their panic, confusion, and disbelief spoke louder than any words could. Within weeks, the Beaverton house was vacated. The driveway cleared, curtains drawn, the space emptied of entitlement and filled with the quiet affirmation of justice. I sold the property at market value, used the funds to secure my own apartment across town, and for the first time, truly felt the air of independence fill my lungs. Looking back, I realized the lesson wasn't just about the BMW, the house, or even the inheritance. It was about boundaries, vigilance, and self-respect. Years of being the quiet, patient daughter had taught me one thing. Silence in the face of entitlement isn't weakness, it's a shield. But it's also a choice. And sometimes, justice demands not silence, but action. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to dramatize or humiliate. I simply needed the law, the truth, and the courage to wield both. My family learned that day that manipulation, favoritism, and assumptions of power have limits. And for me, Emmy Collins, that was a victory more profound than any material possession. Moral lessons. This story teaches that patience and silence can be powerful tools, but they should never become a shield that allows others to manipulate or take advantage of you. Boundaries are not optional. They are essential for protecting your future, your achievements, and your self-respect. Hard work, integrity, and careful planning always pay off, even if others try to claim your success. Sometimes, justice doesn't require anger or confrontation. It requires clarity, courage, and the willingness to act wisely. If you've ever been undervalued, dismissed, or betrayed, remember that reclaiming your life and asserting your worth is not selfish, it's necessary. Stand firm, trust in your preparation, and let the truth speak for itself. If you've ever been taken for granted, dismissed, or undermined by those who should have loved you unconditionally, remember this. Reclaiming your future doesn't require vengeance, just clarity, courage, and the will to assert what is yours. Stand firm, plan wisely, and let the truth, and the law, do the work for you.